6:15 a.m., July 25th, 1944, west of St. Lo. The hedges look like fortress walls in the gray light. Engines idle low, dew clings to fenders, and crews stare at earthen banks that have killed tanks all month. This is how a taxi driver's field-built idea turned the bocage from a killing maze into a door and set loose a breakout. March with the column, hear the steel hit dirt, and see the shock on the ambushers' faces. Subscribe for more frontline moments where small ideas change big battles. Before that morning, Normandy fought back like a labyrinth. Hedgerows rose 3 to 4 meters when you counted the packed bank and the tangled hedge, and every field became a sealed room with guns behind it. Allied tanks had the numbers, but not the angle. Every time a Sherman tried to climb a bank, it pitched up, the thin belly showing, and a POC 40 behind a hedge fired into it like a range target. Blasting the banks worked, but slowly and loudly. Explosive rule of thumb said, blow a hole, fill it with bodies, and pay the price in men, while Germans zeroed the next field. Weeks dragged. 1st U.S. Army inched forward through clay and roots, losing vehicles and leaders, while 7th Corps marked gains in hedges, not kilometers. That stagnation pulled a sergeant's eye to junk steel. Curtis G. Cullen III, 102nd Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron, had handled a New York steering wheel before he handled a turret, and now he handled beach obstacles, measuring angles by sight. On the sand, Czech hedgehogs lay toppled like broken cranes. He saw beams that bit into tracks and stopped landing craft, and imagined them biting into hedgerows instead of stopping tanks. The theory moved fast from thought to torch. With Captain Jimmy Dew backing the try, crews cut and re-welded I-beams, rails, and plates into 4 blunt teeth set low on a Sherman's face. Welders dragged field generators close, preheated joints, and built gussets so the prongs would not shear off with the first bank. Brackets tied into the hull's lower glacis to spread the load. Design mattered. The teeth needed to hit the bank before the nose lifted, to cut roots while the tank was still level, and to convert the push into a forward bite instead of a climb. Sharp points would spear and stick, so they went with chisel edges that would split and plow. A slight downward cant let the cutter start under the foliage and dig like an iron plowshare. Weight stayed a factor. Too heavy, and the front bogies carried a dead weight that snapped suspensions. Too light, and the teeth would fold. Crews chose rough symmetry over precision and got the balance close. They practiced on test banks behind the line. Drivers learned to pick second gear, bring revs up, ease the clutch, and let torque do the work instead of ramming and spinning. Infantry tactics adjusted around the machine. A squad followed at a safe interval, ready to pour into the new gap with grenades and rifles, while the turret covered the far hedge with HE. Radio nets grew discipline. Platoon leaders marked lanes, assigned fields, and kept tanks from pushing through the same hole and inviting a bottleneck under mortar fire. The demonstration near St. Lo sold it. A Sherman with new teeth lined up on a live hedge, went forward, stayed level, and burst through without showing a rib of belly. Word moved in hours. General Omar N. Bradley heard, saw, and said yes. Build them everywhere, use what you have, and do it quietly. Commanders called scrap fair game. Steel came off German obstacles, farm gates, bridge rails, anything that sparked under a torch and fit a bracket. By the end of the month, the idea was more than a one-off. Roughly 60% of 1st U.S. Army's tanks carried cutters by July 31st, and secrecy kept most of them covered until the moment. Operation Cobra provided the hammer to the new chisel. About 1,500 heavy bombers hit the German line west of St. Lo, with around 380 mediums and fighter bombers clawing lanes into the dust. Friendly fire fell short in places and reminded everyone the sky could be as dangerous as the hedges. Even so, The plan shifted the ground and the Germans' balance. German doctrine had rested on the hedgerows' geometry. POC 40 crews dug in behind banks and waited for silhouettes to rise, for belly plates to shine, for easy shots at close range. They did not plan for level tanks bursting through at muzzle height. A field-built tool rewrote the angles right under them. Now the morning uses that new math. Dust from the bombardment hangs low, and a rhino-nosed Sherman rolls forward, engine note steady, gunner's sight on the far hedge instead of the sky. The driver lines up on a green wall mottled with dirt. The teeth touch a leaf first, then bite clay, and the hull stays flat as the bank shudders and splits. A German crew waits for a silhouette to crest. None comes, only a frontal plate punching through smoke and leaves, the 75 already pointed at their muzzle flash. First shot out is high explosive, set super quick. The bank coughs soil and splinters, and the ambush dies before its second round. 2 tank lengths behind, infantry pour through the hole in a low run. They move left and right, clearing corners where branches hide eyes and rifles. A second Sherman does not use the first gap. It hits another seam 10 yards over, makes its own mouse hole, and keeps the momentum from stacking up. Platoon sergeants on the net call fields by numbers. 2-2 through, 2-3, make your own. Stay low in the cut, watch the right tree. P-47s slide overhead and mark the next hedge with rockets. The tanks keep their heads down under branches, avoiding the classic silhouette against the sky. German mortars bracket the new openings. The answer is speed. The third tank kicks through, throws a smoke shell, and drags the platoon forward before the second bracket lands. Every field becomes a tempo decision. Push fast and risk a freak mine, or slow down and take a square of pre-aimed artillery to the face. 7. Corps pushes pressure along the whole seam. J. Lawton Collins drives his divisions, 29th, 30th, and the armored muscle, through separate bites so the line cannot heal. A PAC 40 shifts to catch a lane. Turret traverse beats them by seconds, and coaxial fire rakes the crew as the main gun hammers their shield. Farm lanes that once funneled men into killing zones now become bypasses. The cutters make new gates where none existed and throw off the defender's map. At one hedge, the teeth find a rock core and kick the nose up. The driver drops the clutch, resets the line 6 feet right, and the bank gives way like wet sawdust. Roots rip with a sound like tearing canvas. The tank slides forward into a field that should have been safe for the Germans for another minute, and that minute no longer exists. Some banks hold better than others. Crews learn quick to pick the seams where brush thins and the clay looks cracked, and to avoid hedge corners strengthened by old stumps. Infantry adopt hedge discipline. One man checks low, another high, and one watches the next bank, because fire can come from 3 sides, and the 4th side will shoot soon. The air smells like churned earth and fuel. Dust makes a new weather, and every breath tastes like the bank you just erased. Speed, not spectacle, becomes the weapon. Tanks do not pose on berms anymore. They move, shoot, and keep the next field honest before it can become a trap. German counterattacks arrive late and wrong-footed. Panzer grenadiers spill into a field expecting crests and silhouettes, and instead they face iron jaws already in their hedges. A company commander calls a halt to dress a torn track. Another platoon picks up the lane because stopping in a hole invites every mortar within 5 kilometers. B-26s roll down a road of air overhead and flatten a crossroads that fed the line. The tanks aim left and exploit the shock while infantry mark prisoners for pickup. By midday, the pattern repeats. Faster. Gaps multiply into lanes, lanes fork into paths, and paths open a road out of the hedgerow city. Columns that could barely cross 1 field per hour now cross 5 because they cut 5 gates instead of queuing at 1. The geometry is theirs again. An old farm wall takes a beating by a rhino and falls into a slot like blocks. That slot becomes the battalion's route for vehicles that have no cutters, but have the need. Commanders ride the radio, adjusting pressure. If one sector bogs down against an uncuttable bank, a P-47 marks it with smoke, and the next platoon shifts left into softer ground. In a copse, a German machine gun tries to hose a gap. The lead Sherman answers with canister at 20 meters, then pushes the teeth through the next bank before anyone can reset. The hedges absorb artillery, but they also hide the American noise. German guns waste shells at empty holes while the tanks already moved to the next field. Ditch lines once meant certain belly exposure. Now the teeth eat the ditch lip, the hull dips only inches, and the driver feels through with a steady left pedal. Nobody tries to climb. That habit dies in a single morning, replaced by the new one. Face the bank, push, and keep the gun level. On command, the battalion collapses a wider section, turning mouse holes into a gate big enough for half-tracks and jeeps. Traffic control moves in, flags up, even here. Elsewhere along the line, units without cutters follow behind units with them. The first platoon makes the door. The second wave turns that door into a road. A German observer radios that the Americans are coming through the walls. The phrase carries panic because the walls were the plan. By the time the sun climbs, the rhythm is set. Bombers have broken the roof, and the cutters have given every room a door. Beyond St. Lo, the fields thin, and the U.S. armor starts to feel the country again. Speed builds as the hedgerow city finally runs out of tricks. Engineers lay tape on new lanes so supply trucks can follow. A platoon of Shermans sits on a hedgerow lip that no longer exists, and crews finally lift hatches for a breath. Prisoners trickle back in small groups, dazed and filthy. They look at the tanks and then at the ragged banks, as if the earth betrayed them. The day keeps moving west. What stalled for 6 weeks now shifts in hours, and a field-made tool has changed not just machines, but time. Men who mocked the teeth as junk now knock dirt out of the prongs with pride. The nickname Rhino sticks because the front end looks like an animal that does not ask. Behind the line, more torches light. Mechanics without sleep pull steel from every fence and bridge that will give it up, because tomorrow needs twice as many gates as today. The next hedgerow seems less tall just by reputation. Word of the morning has spread, and doubt moved from one side of the line to the other. Crews that once feared the angle now fear the stall. They keep gears low and revs high because movement keeps you alive in a moving battle. In a hamlet, villagers watch tanks carve a door through a bank that had lined fields since their grandparents' grandparents. Ancient earth becomes fresh rubble in seconds. By late afternoon, columns link up beyond their old field boundaries. The mosaic of small gains becomes a sheet, and the road to Coutances is no longer a rumor. When evening comes, hatches close again. There is still fight left in Normandy, but the hedgerow's trick is gone, and all that remains is force and speed. The immediate aftermath was momentum. Units reported on-the-spot conversions, debriefed the drill that worked, and pushed cutters forward to any hull that could carry them. Records vary on the exact number converted in the first days. Recognition followed quickly. Kulin received a medal for a battlefield invention that moved faster than orders, even as crews kept welding teeth through the night to ward of ranches. It mattered because it gave back surprise at zero elevation. Tanks entered fields already aimed, and infantry crossed lanes without paying for every bank in blood. The hedgerow cutter did not win Cobra alone. but it let the combined arms plan run at full speed instead of crawling into every ambush. Change spread on paper and in practice. Maintenance sections added cutter kits to their load plans, and platoon SOPs baked in "make your own gate" as a standard drill. Training adjusted across the Army. Drivers learned torque and bite technique, infantry rehearsed hedge entries, and units treated field fabrication as a weapon, not an indulgence. The takeaway is simple. When the map says impossible, look at the angles and change them with what you have. Small steel, welded fast, can move an army. For more hard-edged stories of battlefield problem-solving that flipped entire fronts, subscribe now.